Welcome to the Personal Brand Leadership Show, hosted by Dr. Nick and Prof. Gary. The show is brought to you by reciprocationmarketing.com.
This is the Personal Brand Leadership Show featuring Janine Hills. Janine, welcome, and thank you very much for making time. Now, you have had a long and illustrious career. Can you tell us, where did your career start?
First of all, good afternoon, Dr. Nick. Wonderful to be in your audience today, and what a privilege. And yes, my career, believe it or not, began as my first job as a receptionist at the Holiday Inn in Port Elizabeth.
Wow. So,
bit of a surprise, huh?
A receptionist at the Holiday Inn in PE. So what were the stations along your journey? Where did you go next?
I think it was an interesting thing. At a very young age, the age of 16, I knew where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to get into the hospitality industry. I loved the idea of serving, of making better people, interaction, and I needed to learn skills. I came from an exceptionally poor background. That at the age of 13, I was helping my father when he was running his business from home, and I was basically almost the secretary at times and making his booking appointments. So I learned a lot about business handling in a very, very early age, at a very young age. And also, believe it or not, from the age of 13, that I used to sell fish. My dad used to go scuba diving and skin diving, and over the holiday period, he used to shoot these huge fish when it was still allowed in those days. And we used to sell them and to the holiday goers and whatever out at the various jetties, and that's how we used to pay for our holidays. So at a very early age, I had to learn negotiations, planning, diary management, negotiating, pricing, working long hours, dealing with teams of people, stakeholders, all that type of thing, and then the hotel and hospitality industry. And that was where I wanted to be for 10 years.
So you're a true entrepreneur, born in the hospitality industry, and you say for 10 years. So where did you go after hospitality?
I looked at hospitality and I realized a couple of things. We have an incredible hospitality industry in our country, first of all. And I think we've really proved it with the standard of hotels we have in our country and what we've also exported to Africa and around the world. And as I travel internationally now, I see the standards in South Africa hotels, and sometimes far surpasses a lot of the hotels we have. So I'm really proud that was a very strong grounding for me personally of how to deal with customers and service. Thereafter, believe it or not, I was part of the launch team of Vodacom in the sales side of it, and I was the 15th employee in Vodac, which was the sales and marketing arm of Vodacom. So it was a privilege to be part of that team.
That must have been an amazing experience. Vodacom obviously being one of the flagship companies of South Africa today. So is that where you picked up your branding expertise?
It's when I started to learn from people like Alan Knott Craig. You have people like that are doyens that brought GSM into Africa. And I learned how to, through our stakeholders, and that we were going to government homes and to our ministers and to our president's home at that stage in the early, at the early 90s, and helping people put their cell phones together, putting contacts into their cell phones, helping them unplug their cell phones against the wall because people couldn't trust how this thing worked. So it was an early days of technology and introducing technology into the top end, and of course then how you were able to filter it down. But I learned more than just branding. I learned how to run call centers. I learned how to operate call centers. I learned how to operate a business. Cash flow, management of cash flow, really how to deal with dealers, retailers and dealers was a very, very strong part of networking. And one thing that Alan taught me that has never ever left my mind of dealing with branding, and that is pricing, make it simple and easy. Remember, he was bringing a technology product into the marketplace. It was very complex. He said, let's just make this thing very simple. And you saw the humorous ads that came out on Vodacom when it first launched. That was what he worked so hard at. Pricing, we had 3 models, an A and a B and a C product. And that's always been maintained in the industry, top end, middle end, and an entry level. So it was very much, it taught me how to price the model, it taught me how to look at the audience and match the pricing to suit the audience as well. And the retail side, I launched 50 of the retail shops, the Vodacom shops in the market. So I learned about the ergonomics and the design of the shops and the layout with Chris Ross, who is still one of the directors at Vodacom to this day.
So you are a true Vodacom pioneer.
Very much so. Very much so.
Where did you go from Vodacom? Where did you pioneer next?
After working with Shamil Yusuf, who is the current CEO of Vodacom, and launching Vodacom Equipment Company for the whole of Africa, and actually all the buying for all the cell phones around the world, I sat with Shamil and I said, I've been given a tremendous offer as a marketing director for Prime Media and for the Prime Movie section of their group, which was to sit on the boards, 4 boards, and it was my first board appointment, Kaiser Chiefs, and to help do the deal with Kaiser Chiefs when Prime Media bought in a 40% share and stake into Kaiser Chiefs. And I really wanted to understand our audience more and more and more, and South Africans more and more and more, and it was a fantastic opportunity. So I stepped in as the marketing director there at that stage.
At Prime Media, and then obviously you stayed in marketing, and then I assume you started on your own with Vuma.
No, I then was headhunted by Paul Harris, if you can believe that, one of the founder members of First Rand. And he's just such an incredible gentleman. And he invited me for a meeting because I turned all the meetings and all the interviews down because I was very happy working with William Kirsch, to be very honest with you. And it was a privilege to work directly with William Kirsch. And he said, Paul Harris said to me, I have a very exciting project that I need to talk to you about. And I turned all the interviews, all the calls, even Michael Udana made a call through to me, and I turned all the calls down. And we had a private meeting with all the board of directors at the RMB's offices in Sandton, and they pushed a white piece of paper in front of me and said, we have this thing called ebucks.com that we want to launch. And they asked me to launch it in 2 weeks after I joined them. And I said to them, you've got to be joking. So I then put in my resignation. I then made plans and I made the recommendations of what needs to be done to build a brand and to build a business. They had the business model that they would like to work around, but it was the e-commerce initiative for the First Rand Group. Why? Because First Rand was at that stage the 4th bank at that stage in the fold, and they were lagging behind in the e-commerce. They really needed to have something that would leapfrog, and that's where ebucks.com was created.
Well, I believe 2014 FNB was voted the most innovative bank in the world.
Correct, and that's where it all started. It all started in those days. We were chosen, we were hand chosen. There were 15 of us to turn the model around and to create the innovation that would push FNB into what it is today.
So from Vodacom into FNB into eBucks, I mean, that sounds almost too good to be true. Where did you go next? Surely after that, you must have gone into Vuma.
No, I then had a very interesting journey where Paul said, I really need you to come and help me to be part of the turnaround team of First National Bank. And that was crucial to help. We were in the middle of retrenching 8,000 employees at that particular time. You're talking about a bank that's got 25,000 employees, and you're talking about a group that has 45,000 employees. So it is about working and making sure that you work with individuals and bring out the best in them and make sure we are really focusing on what the bank needs to be doing, the revenue streams, the multi-revenue streams, and maximize the business for what it is. So I worked on that for over a year. And yes, I then took a year out. I focused on myself for a year to basically center myself, Dr. Nick, to find who I was.
So who was Janine Hills after that 1 year?
Well, I think whenever you look, it's possibly the darkest thing to ever do for each individual when you sit in a quiet space and you look within and you begin to realize that when you are attached to a corporate and when your name is attached to a corporate or you become a name like a Janine Hills attached to so-and-so or to this brand or that brand, you start to live in a bit of an illusion of who you actually are. And I realized I needed to be just who I am. And I took that time out and I realized I am a person with the highest levels of honesty and integrity, and I love working in this country. I'm a South African at heart, and I want to make an impact wherever I actually am.
Well, Janine, before we come to Vuma, you're very well known for your pro bono activities. Can you share a little bit what is it that you do pro bono for the country and for the industry?
I think we live in a society that you have to give back. We don't have a choice, actually. It's kind of, if you want to live in this country and you want to be part of a growing nation and a country that's been through trials and tribulations and be part of the corrective behavior moving forward, you have to play a role. And I'm very, very privileged to be able to sit on the Brain South Africa board and be able to direct and make recommendations and interact with good times, tough times, the guys are doing a great job, the things that we need to improve on, and discuss these things in an open manner that we can make a difference, work at ministerial level, and make sure that when people integrate and talk with each other, we can do it in an open manner. So that's the one thing that I encourage at all levels. I also sit on the board of the International Brand and Women's Forum, which is a fabulous forum. In fact, it's not even about the board appointment. I've been with the International Women's Forum now for about 8 years, and we've always given back. We've always made sure that we've got to highlight the role of women in government, first of all, the role of government in corporate, because we know that only 8% of women on the boards of the JSC, and we've got to highlight this, but also we've got to work with the women themselves, our leaders, our female leaders, to look at them and say, what is it about myself as a female leader? Why am I not a chairman? Why am I not a CEO? Why am I not sitting on that board? What is it required of me to be able to do X, Y, and Z? So that's what we do. And of course, we have an internship program within Vuma Reputation Management as well. And we make sure that from a reputation point of view, we bring people along to understand the skills that are required in Africa.
Now, Janine, you bring an incredible energy to your job, to your profession, to the industry. What is driving you ultimately?
I think just passion. I have a passion for life. I go to an ashram every Thursday. I would have been there today if there wasn't a board meeting. Every Thursday morning is blocked out in my diary from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And that's my time to give back to a greater being. And that is my space and my time to give gratitude for what I've become and for everything that I have, from my ears to my eyes, to my mouth, to my throat, to everything that I have, my health, everything that I have, I give back because I'm so grateful to be here.
An inspiring lesson to be shared.
Janine, can you tell us, what does personal branding mean to you?
I think it's a very important part because your personal brand from a corporate reputation point of view stands for who you are as an individual. So if we take an individual's reputation, it's what you stand for. So what are your leadership skills? What are your performance levels? What do you give back to society? What is your reliability? What is your trustworthiness? What is your knowledge and skills in the marketplace? It's a holistic picture of what you stand for as an individual and what you build up to build your reputation over the years. Then that allows you to become the persona who heads up an organization, who heads up a board, who chairs a board, who heads up a country.
So obviously you have to be true to your values, be authentic.
Absolutely. I think that word is absolutely pertinent. Is authenticity rules all the way through. But you must be able to touch on the relevancy that is important. So the 9 dimensions of building a reputation for a corporate, a country, and a persona is exactly the same. There are certain things that need to come into that.
What have you learned from your journey that is most important to building a strong brand?
I think one thing is patience, persistence. And I think if we look at what our country is going through right at the moment, we have to have patience, deeper understanding, and we also need to put things into perspective. Find a brand needs to be nurtured. So it's very important that brand needs to be nurtured, which is the paid for advertising and your what you can control on the social media, on your radio, your TV, your print, your online. Very comfortable with that. But your perception value, which is your reputation, which comes beneath it within the yin and the yang, is what we've constantly got to work on it. And where I talk about bringing in the 9 dimensions, of bringing in the authenticity of that brand and what people's perception of that person's brand or the company brand is all about, or the country brand.
So would you agree that people do business with people instead of with businesses?
You know that. I mean, that's a sales thing. I mean, you know, people do business with people they like to do business with. People don't do business with you. You've got all the most professional things in front of you. You've got all the degrees. You've got everything. If you are not a likable individual, people don't like you, or you're not trustworthy, people don't want to do business with you. That's just the way it is. So I suppose if you are a chartered accountant, as an example, and you schooled as a chartered accountant, now all of a sudden you're being groomed into becoming a CEO, one has to be aware that there are certain other skills that one has to learn in that pack to put into your package to move forward to become a leader of an organization as a personal brand, to manage that personal brand.
So for a big corporate, how important is it for them that their people, their staff, has got good personal brands and how can they actually ensure that that happens, that the personal brand is also built instead of just the corporate brand?
And it's absolutely vital. So we're not talking about, so I suppose if you look at soccer teams as an example, I think the Portuguese team now, the Portugal team now, I mean, Ronaldo was the star, but the team didn't only work around Ronaldo. The team strengthened up, and guess what? They still won. I think it was the UEFA Cup. So they still won, no problem at all. The star is not about personal branding. We're talking about, look at Michael Jordan, who was the CEO of First National Bank. Now, I personally worked with Michael at the early days. We started eBucks together. He was in the team. He guided. He taught us. All the way through. So tremendous. He worked in his personal reputation all the way through. Innovation, and then he became a persona within himself, because he has, first of all, he's a doctorate. He's a doctor in economics, and he's influential in how he speaks. So then he started using the tools like a social media tool. Now, he never in the wildest dreams expected to become incredibly popular. That wasn't his aim. He merely wanted to engage with the people out who are his audience. Why? Because F&B is a retail bank. So if it had been just a wealth bank, just a private bank, he wouldn't have done that. But because he was a CEO of a retail bank, he chose to do that, and it was the right thing to do. Now, if you look at the current CEO, Jacques Cilliers, who, believe it or not, was also part of the team in eBucks with us. Yeah. You look at Jacques, and it's not Jacques. That's not Jacques' personality. Jacques' personality is not Michael's personality. So Jacques has got to find his feet in who he is and how he will need to drive his personal brand. But does he have all the right checks and balances? Has he earned his worth? Absolutely. If you look at his credentials, absolutely. Now, in the stakeholders, he's got to earn that worth. He's starting to earn it internally. That's the most important thing. And the second thing is with the various stakeholders using different platforms. A nice thought leadership here, making sure he's integrating with corporates here, making sure he's integrating with the CEOs on different levels, with our parliamentarians. So you build up your persona over a period of time, but the credibility and the reliability and the trustworthiness is crucial.
What would you like to tell aspiring leaders? What should they focus on for building their brand?
I think the one thing is know your skills, be very aware of the audience around you. Be cautious in saying things when you're not an expert. If you are an expert in a specific arena, make a statement. If you're not an expert in that arena, be very cautious, or if you want to, put it into perspective. I find a lot of people, and some of our leaders, don't always put things into perspective. We shoot from the hip, or we use an emotional decision. And I think we're in a situation where we, in our country right now, people are sensitive. So we need to walk a very cautious line, but not a non-vocal line. We need to be heard. It is tough at times, but we need to be brave. We need to stand our ground, and we need to be able to harness our negotiating skills and work with people.
Just as a matter of interest, Donald Trump, is he shooting from the hip? What do you think he really considers before he speaks?
I watched the engagement, the last engagement between him and Hillary Clinton. And I think I've never been so embarrassed for a country in my entire life. He absolutely shoots from the hip, but I'm certainly not here to judge another person. It scares me if he becomes president. It scares me for a few reasons. Is that the person we want our children to look up to? Will he do great things? I'm sure he possibly will. But his whole character. I think when you look at what does Hillary stand for as a character and a personal brand, and you look at Donald Trump, what does he stand for? I wouldn't like my children to follow someone like a Donald Trump. And I think that's what we talk about, honesty, integrity, and longevity of a personal brand. That's a PR engine on steroids. And people have fallen for the trap. The media have fallen for the trap. And it's sad what's actually currently happening, in my personal point of view.
Now, Janine, let's talk about Vuma, the brand Vuma, where Vuma started. And you just shared that we are now celebrating the birth month of Vuma, October 2005.
We are. So, Vuma Reputation Management is not just Vuma, by the way, just because you know why I've got to manage this. Because we've now got Vuma Tel that's now come into the fold. And we've also now there's another Vuma radio station that's come into the fold. So from an ownership point of view, we're talking about branding. I've got to watch the brand very carefully. So I don't believe we are strong enough yet from a brand management point of view to drop the reputation management yet. I believe you still have to say Vuma, reputation management, to enhance the brand and to get that across so that people know what we do. Just in case people might get confused that I own a fiber optic company. So just, we're talking about branding, but that's how we've got to manage our own brand and my own reputation.
Well, it's a good thing you mentioned that, because the other day, last week, I was driving behind the Vuma van.
There we are. Thank you.
Now, when you started Vuma Reputation in 2005, what were your initial thoughts? What was your vision? What was your initial drive?
This is going to surprise you somewhat, Dr. Nick. While I took my year out, I was in the 10th month, and I was allowing myself to just understand what was going on and where I was going and what I wanted to do. And at 11 o'clock at night, I sat bolt upright in bed, and I knew I had to open a reputation management company. I had no idea what it was, but I realized that it was what I've been doing for the last 15 to 20 years anyway. Once I was able to put it together, I realized. So I sent out an email to 10 of the most powerful people in South Africa, people that have been mentors to me, like Joan Joffe, Alan Craig, Paul Harris, Michael Jordan, and a few others, and said, this is what I wanted to start. And I must say, 9 out of them were hugely positive. There was one individual that came across and said, "Are you beep, 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 crazy?" And I think it's the strangest thing, because that person I found subsequently is busy doing reputation management. So I knew that this was a message, this was something that needed to be done. And if you remember, we go back 11 years, believe it or not, it wasn't something everybody was doing. And some people still think it's what the States is doing, which is literally only crisis management, that you only need to manage your reputation when you hit a crisis. And we've chosen not to go that route. We've chosen to go the holistic route of preventing crisis and holistically work with the brand and the organization that we're working with.
So is it fair to say that Vuma is actually taking care of the entire brand?
Very much so. We work. So when we formulated Vuma Reputation Management, we said what do we need to do? So it was about where are the shortcomings in organizations? Why are we still landing up with crisis situations? Why do people still need assistance when they need assistance? Sometimes it is a skill shortage. We accept that. Sometimes, and we have. In some instances, we have lost some very valuable skills in our country. But it is about now our role that we are in the country to help impart those skills. So we for example, we make sure that you look at the communication side of things. So we work with the company and we work with them on the communication side of their brand. Not taking away what the brand masters do and what the marketing director does and the head of brand and all the brand strategists. They do what they do best. They do all their brand positioning. But what often happens is the communication of that brand doesn't happen internally or to their stakeholders. Their social investment, for example, doesn't get that. So we do some amazing things, but nobody knows about it. So from a brand point of view, we start enhancing that.
So in a sense, you are looking after and maximizing the return on communication for the brand.
I would say so. Yes, I think, Dr. Nick, that's a good assumption. I think if we break it down, what we do right now for companies, we're doing their public relations, we're supporting and assisting their teams, always making the teams the champions. Then we'll do crisis communication, absolutely, and we'll do stakeholder management. So, for example, if a company needs to get into places that they're unable to get in themselves, we work with them to assist them to make sure that they're meeting the right people to holistically pop that brand, and then bring in the marketing people and work with the marketing teams and that. And then, of course, we form the academy, and everything we do, we teach. Then, of course, not forgetting social media intelligence. We brought in the social media intelligence team into that. So where, for example, if you're in a crisis situation, you've got to track all your influencers, see what your influencers are doing, read a situation, for example, a strike, situations we currently have now, for example, fees must fall, whatever it must be, track what's happening from a geolocating point of view. Understand what are people saying in specific locations so that we can match the messages to make sure that we're talking and communicating with. So we are, I would say, the suits of communication working in alignment with the brand managers.
Now, Vuma does not only work with companies, I believe you also work with governments and you work with individuals, celebrities or not celebrities.
No, we chose not to do that.
Right.
We really are a B2B business. That's where our strength is. And if I look at my background, it's really is I've come through the ranks of being in business to business, and of course then having, have worked in government from my point of view, having actually worked in Brand South Africa, being an employee within Brand South Africa, which is a parastatal, which is owned by government. You learn to understand how the PFMA process works, what is expected of you, and what is the red tape that you've got to go through, the do's and the don'ts. So by working in government, you then begin to understand and respect the processes that you've got to go through.
So what would you say have been the biggest success stories for Vuma?
It's such a difficult question you've just asked, because most of the successes, unfortunately, are so highly confidential. As you can imagine, sometimes it's a crisis, and sometimes it's a really tenuous situation that the clients don't want to talk about. But I can mention a few without mentioning the brand, unfortunately, due to confidentiality agreements. But one of them, I'll give you an example, was we had an international brand, a multinational that's very well respected and very well known around the world. They needed to close a division down in South Africa. Now, it's a UK-based organization, and they made a decision to close the business down. They had 175 employees at that specific point in time, but very high profile in South Africa at the time because it was innovation, and they bought a 100 million rand product, and this product just didn't work. So they made a strategic decision, close it down and restart up again, which is the right business decision. The challenge they had, they made a decision to do that in December. We go on holiday in December, our people are treated with respect in December. It's not like that in the UK. They go off just for the Christmas Day and New Year's Day, that's it. It doesn't happen here. South Africa, that's our holiday period. We've got to be able to treat our people differently here. So the first thing we said, sat down with the CEO, we said, let's have a look at the letters that are going out to the employees. Because they were worried about brand damage, they were worried about the reputation of the organisation, and believe it or not, the share price internationally, listed on the London Stock Exchange. So that's what you're watching. So what do? We can't run around paying media, £100 notes, You can't do that. That's not how it's going to work. So we look at the process that you're going to follow. The first thing we needed to do is make sure that the letters to the employees were done with dignity. That's number one. Number two, make sure that the pay ratio of what you're doing for the employees matches the damage that's going to come through in that period of time. So we got them to double the pay package. And then the most important thing, we made sure we got all the employees into one room and we spoke with the people for an entire day, explained to them how, where, why, and what. And the CEO was not going to be involved in this process. He actually said, no, HR's doing this. I normally don't get involved in this process. We said, you have to. But we guarantee you that we're at your side. We hold your hand through that process. We're going to unpack your key messages, and we need to walk you through that journey. It was a 3-month process. Every single day, I laugh to this day. I used to pace outside my house every morning between 8 and 9, do the international call, and everybody used to dial in from around the world. There was 15 people every single morning. They'd dial in from around the world because of the share price, make sure that we were managing the process all the way through. So we had to manage the website, the call centers, and then eventually we had to take that entire database and move it across to another bank, which we duly did. And that process we helped hand over very cleanly. It eventually took a year for the entire process. But with that dignity of how the process went, not one bit of negative coverage in the media in a year. And that's the way you can do things with dignity. So I think that's always one particular job I always say. And I'll tell you why it was so important, in closing, Dr. Nick, why it was so important to do that so correctly. I never forget that meeting that we had the CEO in with the 175 employees. I said to the CEO, if one person leaves this room, we've got a problem in our hands. Because social media and leaks to the media and whatever. And one person did. It was a young little girl, a young Muslim girl from Cape Town, and I watched her, and she went straight into the ladies, and she broke down. I walked into the ladies behind her, and I was able to console her and work with her at that point in time. We found out that her husband had just been retrenched the day before. And what I'm showing you is this is how we have to treat people when we are dealing with these issues. It's not just about blankets, retrenchment or closing a division down or whatever. And I think it's about a journey we take clients through, communication and caring for them and bringing heart into that particular business.
So you're almost bringing humanity to brands.
Very much so.
Now, Vuma does not only have global clients, I believe you also have global relationships, for example, in Switzerland. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, very much so. I suppose all of us, our relationships are crucial. And I met a fantastic guy, Dr. Marcus Renner in India, if you can believe that. We were at a speaking engagement, and we always laugh about it now. And it was about brand and reputation in I think it was New Delhi. And we built up a great relationship and a friendship, and we carried on chatting. And I loved what he was doing. He eventually then wrote a book on the algorithms, and he earned his doctorate on earning his rights as measuring reputation management. So he's got his book, and he's internationally authored, and he's written his white paper around it. And we started the relationship. And then he said, well, will you connect with us on the International Brand and Reputation Forum? I didn't know what that was about. He said, please come and join us. So he invited me to Henley Business School in London, joined him there, and was very impressed. Some of the top brands, top CMOs in the world were in those meetings. And then I went to the second one, which was in Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, they asked me to be a speaker. I presented and shared our knowledge of what we can share in South Africa, and we got a very good response. And then he said, would you like to open something in South Africa? I said, I'll do better than that. We'll open an African chapter, because we work so closely as Africans. And I didn't want South Africa to be separated again from the rest of our colleagues in Africa. So we've opened a South Africa chapter, the International Brand and Reputation chapter. We've had the second meeting now in South Africa, and bono World Equipment Company just hosted us just the other day.
Well, let's quickly see. You're celebrating the 11th birthday of Vuma. What does the future hold? What do the next 11 years hold?
I'm very excited with the team. I think we've built up a very strong team. I think that's what it's all about. I didn't open a company called Janine Hills CC. This is about a company called Vuma Reputation. So now you're in a position where you can modify the organization. So we've got Vuma Reputation Academy, for example. We've already branched out and got 4 alliances in Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and in Mozambique. But we're able to work with our clients through the whole of Africa. So not only are we South Africans, we are humble South Africans working with our colleagues in Africa. We don't go into a country and dictate. We actually work with our colleagues, share skills, impart skills, and we work with the brands and the organizations that we take them into Africa, and we actually work with them in those specific locations with their stakeholders.
What does the future of brand leadership hold in your view? What does a brand of the future look like?
A brand of the future.
Yes.
Yes.
We're talking about the bank of the future. We're talking about the car of the future. So I'm asking you.
Gotta just love you. Your brain doesn't stop working, as you know. I think all entrepreneurs and people that have got ideas, it's about the implementation thereof, of course, that counts. But I do believe, if I look at Vuma Reputation Management, it's about alliance partnerships around the world. So we've already been approached, in fact, this last week again. We have been asked to be bought out in previous years. We've just been asked now by an international party to please represent them in South Africa, and very excited about that. I do think, ideally, what I'd love us to do is take a lot of our training material, our Vuma Reputation Management training material, and be able to have online training and work with people around the world and be able to help prevent so many of the crisis situations that we have, because a lot of the times they can be. So instead of almost like hologram, I would like to go hologram style, where we hologram ourselves into Nigeria, hologram ourselves into Kenya, and work with stakeholders in an integrated way, but using big data. And so bringing robotics into it and bringing vision into what we're wanting to do, and always making sure we're tapping into our various stakeholder levels from LSM 1 to 10, of course, around the world.
So there we go, the hologram brand. It's definitely coming.
Very inspiring talk so far. Janine, how can people get hold of you?
Very available. The good thing is that we've got a website, and it's Vuma Reputation. We shorten it because management, often people spell management incorrectly. It's vumareputation.com. And there's an info. There's also my email address is there. I've got a team which is fabulous that if I'm not available, I've got a secretary and a chief of staff, and a great team that if I'm not able to do something, they will support it as well. On LinkedIn, of course, LinkedIn to me is a phenomenal platform to be able to deal with business leaders and share knowledge. I'm very comfortable with Twitter, as well as on Facebook. Facebook I use from a business point of view, and I think Facebook helps me get to know some of the stakeholders like the media and whatever as well. Twitter I think is more as a news, or we keep it open for a crisis situation as well. But please, very amenable to people to communicate directly with me.
The last question: what is the one thing that listeners can take away from this interview?
I think we need to nurture our reputations. We are, sadly, the world is stepping into a disruptive world. There's no doubt. So we need to nurture our personal reputations, and organizations really need to put a couple of the preparation plans in place in the eventuality of X, Y, and Z. But not only the communications teams and departments, the rest of the organization needs to be aware of those checks and balances, of the preparation work that needs to go in should something go wrong in an organization or with that specific individual. We need to plan and prepare now because of disruptions that we're currently seeing in our world.
Thank you. That concludes our interview. Thank you, Janine Hills from Vuma Reputation Management, and thanks for sharing your passion with all of us.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you for listening to the Personal Brand Leadership Show, hosted by Dr. Nick and Prof. Gary, brought to you by